Hi, I'm Jeremy Elder, staff product designer on the Foundations team at GitLab, and I'm providing a quick overview of how we're approaching dark mode for GitLab. Dark mode generally refers to the visual state of a website or app's UI that uses a darker background with lighter content. GitLab does have an experimental or alpha version of dark mode. You can find it in the settings under your profile. However, what I'm sharing addresses our current effort that's based on design tokenization of the product and updated design principles, which I'll cover more of in a moment. So there are many reasons why a user may want to utilize dark mode, and that's part of the challenge of designing for dark mode is just simply to balance all of these different reasons. There's a lot of subjectivity in visual design, and so we want to focus on the objective points and balance all of the different needs. The first is visual preference. At this moment on my own computer, I'm pretty sure I've customized the visual settings for just about every app that I have open, not to mention the operating system itself. Dark mode benefits users with visual impairments. By limiting the amount of light emitted from the screen, some users are able to more clearly read and discern content while also reducing eye strain. Next is continuity with system settings and other applications. As a user switches context from one tool to another, lessening any jarring transitions can help them stay in the flow. And for us at GitLab, we know dark mode has the potential to make the experience better for any mode and for any user. It may sound like a high promise, but as we're designing for dark mode, we're considering visual hierarchy, containers, affordance, all things that objectively can be applied to any mode or any product view. Lastly, we want to focus on providing more enhancement, guidance, and cohesion in the UI so that users can complete tasks faster. And for those who spend a good deal of time in GitLab, like I do, the experience should overall be more comfortable and enjoyable. Before I share a few examples, I'd like to cover the high-level design principles we're using. Forward things are lighter, receding ones are darker. This follows the natural behavior of light and proximity. Brightness is a stronger indicator of depth than shadows or borders can be. In a dark UI, brighter borders themselves can compete more with content, and shadows just don't stand out as much. Color stands out more in dark UI, so less of it is needed when compared to light UI. You can see in this example of an alert, the background in light mode is flooded with a light blue. There's a blue icon. And in dark mode, we're leveraging color mainly for the iconography, heading, and an emphasized border on the element. We don't need the larger flood of color there. Some elements are dimmed while others are inverted. If you can think of dark mode as dimming the lights more than inverting, then we can see how we can be more thoughtful with surfaces and pulling them back. And at the same time, being thoughtful about our content and actually inverting content to make that stand out. But we're not applying one either dimmed or inverted to everything at the same time. We're being thoughtful about different elements, different surfaces, so that we can focus on content coming forward and pulling back surfaces. Surfaces themselves are top lit by a natural light source. They reflect light instead of being a source of it. We're not doing any glows or emitting of light, and they're made of dark materials. So if you can, again, imagine the concept of something being dimmed, we're dimming it based on the material that's being used and not so much an effective inversion. So let's get into some component examples. This first is just a collection of different components from the design system. This is what it looks like in light mode. This is what it looks like in the current experiment alpha, and this is what it looks like in concept. And now as I go through all of these, one really good test is just to do either like a squint test until the screen looks either fuzzy or blurry, or to even step back a little bit and watch as the transitions happen between each, particularly between the alpha and the concept here. Uh, the goal is to bring elements forward that need to be forward and let other elements recede. So we're really working on those design principles here, allowing them to do the heavy lifting for us. And the alpha, quick squint test, the sign in button, the change path button, this alert for new information really stand out. Yet these elements that would overlay content, typically like a pop over tooltip toast drop down, they're starting to recede. In the concept, repeat that same test. And now elements that should come forward are starting to come forward. It's a little more clean, a little more modern. We don't have as many borders competing with that. Over here, I have just two examples. One is light mode, one is dark mode, the new dark mode. And I really want to call out the difference between a few components and the synchronization of others. So in particular, label and badge historically share many attributes. We're wanting to emphasize those differently. So have badge really stand out stronger because it is related to status, and that's very important to see status. Labels, on the other hand, user-generated content, often very many of them integrated into content. And so being able to leverage that user-selected color in meaningful ways, but not have labels so strong, especially when we know that there can be a collection of those that it grows over time. Popover, Toast tooltip, synchronizing those. So in light mode, where today they're using 3 different backgrounds and different text treatments, in this dark mode direction, they are more synchronized and have very similar styles. In light mode, buttons and inputs, particularly default button and input, they share a lot of properties with the exception of the border color, which is so close that sometimes it can look like a mistake. We want to further differentiate the input types so that it's more clear what is an action, what is an input, increase those affordances for those elements. Here's a policies page. This is an actual screenshot of a policies page that has a banner and 3 different alerts. In light mode, we're using a very light flood of color behind the alerts. Banners are using just a lighter neutral. And so here, not very strong. We're using color for that background and iconography, pretty minimal. In alpha, however, they become quite saturated, quite strong. Notice now the banner blends into the background. And in the concept direction, we're using a subtle background for these elements so that they stand off from the main surface just ever so slightly. And then for these alerts, rather than larger floods of color, like I mentioned with the principles, we're leveraging color in smaller ways in dark UI. Just with more light being emitted from the screen, there's more opportunity for those colors to pop, if you will. I don't like using that term too much, but you understand the concept here. I think it's applicable. So iconography, headings, this border, it allows this content to not scream at you, to not fight with what you're there for on the page. At the same time, it's still important content. We still want it to be something where you provide these visual anchors as you scan the page and look through it. Here is a section of a repo page. Light mode, we've got a lot of borders happening on buttons and containers and dividers. Alpha repeats the same. And in our concept, flipping the hierarchy to make it more meaningful top down, it's, again, that squint test, you see elements popping off of the surface, you see headers standing out, you see borders used intentionally just to highlight functionality, where other borders, in here are being used to allow content to stand out without calling out the border. So the borders recede, but they still have the same separating effect. Likewise, components, buttons, actions, they stand out on their own. They don't need an additional border to give them that affordance, and it further separates them from things that might be inputs. Last one, a smaller one here, table layout, again, similar to what was on the repo. But we have a lot of borders, a lot of things happening to contain items, particularly buttons and this unprotect button. And this is fine in light mode. It works. I think there are some improvements we could bring back later. For example, alpha, now all of a sudden these rows are standing out more than this header. The unprotect buttons, the text fights and competes with that border around that text. So it becomes like your eye wants to focus on multiple elements there rather than just what that button is communicating. These select elements that kind of fade into the background, they don't necessarily look enabled. With the concept, we're really focusing on bringing that header in, bringing out these rows, allowing interactive selection pieces to come forward, allowing buttons to still be prominent, but not overwhelming, allowing that text to stand out and not compete with the border or even the background surface. So it's same meaning, same intentionality, but more modern, more approachable, and less competition happening. So here looks more wireframe like, a lot of containers, a lot of borders. Here, still same containers, minimizing the borders and allowing other elements to stand out. To sum things up, we're excited to be working on bringing you a new dark mode that we believe will improve your experience. So stay tuned for more, and thank you.